Steven Clark, welcome to the Goshen Chronicles, and thank you so much. I know you're a busy man and making the time to stop by and chat a little bit about you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. So I'm learning a lot about you. I don't really know where to start. You're a very interesting person. You do. I met you a couple of weeks maybe at one of the meetings in downtown Goshen, actually the library. And you were talking a little bit about your background. You served in the military. Now you just mentioned you've been over 100 countries.
Yeah.
You run triathlons.
Triathlons, yeah.
Triathlons, thank you. And you're also a councilman for the Elkhart County.
Yes.
And so you're a lawyer?
I am.
You run a construction company? My gosh, man.
Yeah, I think those are, David Brooks would refer to those as resume virtues.
Yeah.
And so, but it's, I've padded that. I think they sound more impressive than they are. But it's the character virtues that I'm always challenging my kids on. So, and that's, if you ever get to meet my wife, she is the most impressive person you'll ever meet because her character virtues just outshine most people. And so, but yes, you're correct. So to give you a little background, I was born to a single mother in California. And so she was struggling to take care of me when I was 2 months old. A Peruvian family that had just immigrated to the United States. My Nana actually never spoke English till the day she died.
Really?
My papi is still alive. He splits his time between Peru. He goes back to Lima, and there are winters, and then there are summers, and then he comes back to the U.S. But they had immigrated to the United States. Kind of took me in. So my first language was Spanish. I didn't speak English till I was a little bit older. When I was a little, maybe 4 or 5, I started preschool, went back, kind of lived primarily with my mom, bounced around, lived with my dad for a little bit, lived with grandparents. There was summers with aunts and uncles. You're moving around. In 4th grade, I moved to Missouri, southeast Missouri, middle of nowhere. The nearest Target is over an hour and a half away. They get off 2 weeks of school for deer season. It's a very different culture. I became just a punk. My grandpa, who'd been a lot like my father figure, dies. And so I think just a young man with a lot of energy and no direction, I just got into trouble. All the time I was getting into trouble. And so I ended up actually getting arrested when I was 14.
Wow.
Got locked up for a very short period of time there. And so I was on a path that was definitely not a good one. My closest friends, most of them went to prison. But when I was 16 years old, I started dating a girl, and her dad was kind of this acting pastor. So what do you do when you're young, dating somebody, and you want to impress her dad? You start going to church every week. And so I at the same time, I read the book Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And there was just so much in there that hit me. And I still remember my argument against God was that the world seems so cruel and unjust. But where had I got this idea of just and unjust? Yeah. A man does not look at a line and call it crooked unless he has some idea of what a straight line is.
Correct.
And so it changed my perspective. And so, started doing a little better. Well, I was also that 9/11 generation. So I was a 1.9 GPA out of high school, which means for every A I got in gym, I had to get a couple Fs just to offset it in real classes. But 9/11 happens, and I joined the U.S. Army. And took the ASVAB, did okay on that. When I went in, I still remember the recruiter said, you can kind of have any job you want. What do you want to do? And I said, what gets me to the front lines the fastest?
Wow.
And
really?
He said, infantry. So I signed up for 11 Bravo infantry as a 17-year-old, joined as a private. And then when you get to basic training and AIT, or OSET as they call it, at Fort Benning, they said, if you did well enough, you could go to what's called airborne school. Well, I want to jump out of planes. That sounds fun. So you raise your hand and you get to go to airborne school. made it to the 82nd Airborne, and there was wanted to go to Special Forces, but it didn't have enough rank at the time. And so I saw a flyer for tryouts for a thing called Scout Recon. I didn't even know what that meant. So I was looking at it, and a friend was there. He was more senior than me, and I asked him, I said, what is that? And he said, that's the recon unit. They get kind of the best missions. They're the snipers. They do these cool things. And I want to try out. And so I tried out, and I always say the same thing. I wasn't the brightest. I wasn't the strongest, but I had a lot of heart. And no matter, I passed out on a run once during the selection process. It's Sandy Hills, and they tell you, start running, and somebody will tell you when to stop. Well, that mentally is hard for you because you don't know how to pace. Is it 10 miles? Is it 2 miles? And so I ended up kind of hitting the ground, hit my head, and but I finished the run. Okay, get off to the side. I said, no, I'm finishing the run, and I kept running. And so I think they selected me because I had heart. And, I think I told you earlier, I ended up going through a thing called U.S. Army Ranger School. And first time I ever tried, I actually didn't make it. And I went to the sergeant and said, I know I didn't make it. How do I try again? And he kind of gave me this look, kind of confused. And he ended up saying, I still remember it. It was the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Most people will hear it and not think that. But he said, I don't think you understand. I don't really care about you. I don't care if you live. I don't care if you die. I care about the team. And you make the team weak. Goodbye. And I recognized at that moment I would never feel that again. And so I started giving it everything I had. And I was, if somebody was pushing at 100%, I was trying to push at 110. And so ended up going back through Ranger School, graduating, and then ended up in Iraq. So I spent parts of 2006, 2007, 2008, and 2009 in Iraq. So a little bit of all of those years. And so a total of about 27 months. And then I got out in January of 2010. Thought I wanted to go to, I went to undergrad. Got my degree in government and then economics. I thought I wanted to go to Washington, D.C. I spent just a few months there and hated it with everything in me.
Why was that?
It's a very pretentious place. It's very based on, well, I worked for Senator such and such. And you're kind of like, shut up, you get the coffee. Nobody cares. Like, this is who, And so it just wasn't a place I'd want to raise a kid. I was married at the time. My wife was still right outside of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where we were stationed. And, I just remember, I don't want to be here. This isn't what I'd want to do long term. And the other thing was, people in the federal government were really miserable. You'd meet a lot of people at the State Department, and you'd say, and they'd hate their job. And I'd ask, like, well, why are you still working here? Well, I have a degree in Farsi. What else am I going to do? Okay. And so I wanted to be in a place with high culture, high character, and I just didn't see what I wanted there. So applied to law school, got accepted to a few places, but the way the GI Bill worked out and a little bit of scholarship, I was able to get a full ride to Indiana University. We knew our goal in life was to move back to Wakarusa, Indiana, here in Elkhart County.
Really?
It's where my wife is from, and since she's been a little girl, her goal was to be a teacher at Wakarusa Elementary. And so we picked IU because we knew it would feed us back into Indiana. And best 3 years of my life. I loved it. Absolutely just had a blast. Wanted to be a prosecuting attorney, but when you're in law school, the big firms kind of recruit you. So I took a job at a big firm, and it was it did pay well, but it was boring. I mean, it was just, Target sued Walmart, and we want to know if we can file this type of motion in the Northern District of Missouri. And you're like, I'm never going to care. I'm never going to care. Walmart's not going to remember this. Target's not going to remember this. And so at the time, Curtis Hill was the prosecuting attorney here in Elkhart County. he had heard that I was kind of interested in maybe going to the U.S. Attorney's Office or something like that. So we had a conversation. He said, I'd really like you to come here. And one of the things he told me is we have an undercover unit. They're battling cartel member. They're really going after it. And we'd like somebody like you who's got a military background that can speak their language and an attorney. And so I took him up on it. I met with Vicki Becker, our current elected prosecutor, beforehand, and I said I want to make sure, because I hear he's running for attorney general, and I want to make sure that we get along. We did, and I worked there for a couple years, and I loved it. Just absolutely amazing job. The ability to do good for a lot of people. There's a crime and there's a victim, and you can protect that victim on some level.
Yeah.
But it doesn't pay very well. So at the time, this is probably 8 years ago or so, a friend of mine reached out to me. He had a business. He was having a business issue, said, hey, what would you do in this situation? I gave him my opinion. Long story short, he ended up making me a very lucrative offer, and it was too hard to pass up. Problem was the job was in Chicago, so I was commuting, 3 days a week. I lived in Chicago. And then I was home the other 4 days, but that takes a toll. So my wife at one point said, are you going to be gone 3 days our life for the rest of our life? Because I thought that's why we got out of the Army.
Yeah.
And so to back up, when my wife and I first got together, in the first 4 years we were together, I was gone over 3 of them with the military.
Wow.
So she was kind of like, I don't know. Local company here in Elkhart County, our Yoder Construction, where I currently work, reached out to me, said, we'd really like to grow. We know you, we like you. I met with them, and their culture, their faith-based, everything that I believed in was what they represented. And it was just, it was, I loved it. And so that's where I've been ever since. So
you mentioned your faith. So actually that girl that you were dating, that sounds like a turning point for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it wasn't 180 degrees. It was probably 4 degrees, 4 degrees, 4 degrees. But as we were dating, there were definitely things that I realized I wanted, I needed. They've stuck with me. And the truth is, I'm a more logical person. Some people can feel God. Yeah. I don't get that. But if matter can neither be created nor destroyed, where does it come from? Yeah. So for me, there's a beginning. Time is relative, so time's not even linear, depending on the gravitational forces. Yeah. There's a lot of science. The universe is constantly expanding. Well, what's beyond that? So for me, there was just something more. And again, I looked at a lot of faiths. I went to mosque, I went to temple, I did the 6 Mormon discussions, or 5 or whatever it was. I really did a lot of searching. And for me, again, if I was to encourage somebody, read the book Mere Christianity. And that's a just good, logical argument for who Christ was.
Yeah. Awesome. So you are serving as a Elkhart County councilman.
Correct.
How did you get to that? And what made you, what's your motivation to serve?
So there's 2 people currently on the council, Adam Bajolski and Doug Graham. And they had come to me and said, so I've been involved with the Republican Party for a while. I got involved just because I believed in the principles of small government. There wasn't any desire to run, nothing like that. It was just, I want to understand what's going on in our community, and I want to be more involved. Between the 2 parties, I'm picking that one. So got involved. They approached me and said, we'd love for a younger guy. You're an attorney. You work in construction. I think you'd be a good fit. And I kind of laughed and said, no chance. No way would I ever want to do that. I said, I have no desire to run for anything. I'm just here to kind of help. They hit, I think maybe Adam, I can't remember, but one of them hit me up a couple times, and I started, I told my wife about it. You kind of feel good. People, hey, you should run. Oh, that feels good. And there's, how I said I don't feel, I think. My wife feels. Okay. And there's been times in the past where she has felt something, and I just thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard, and it was true. So we're driving down to Indianapolis, and she goes, I really think you should think about that. And why? Why would I ever get involved in politics? Half the people hate you. They don't know you.
Yeah.
People take what you say out of context. Why would I want that? We have a great life. And she goes, I don't know. I just feel like you should really think about it. All right. So we talk about this. This goes on. I talk to some other people. I have kind of a way I make decisions, and one of them is the godly counsel of others. So I go to others and say, what do you think? People who have no dog in the fight. And overwhelmingly, it was 100%. I really think you should do it. I really think you should do it. Okay, well, what does a council member do? So they are the fiscal body for Elkhart County. Well, I have a degree in government and economics. This is kind of my interest. What I knew of council at the time, and it's true, there's not a lot of politics. It's 7-0 Republican, so if we disagree, we're disagreeing on policy. And we have a lot of 4-3 votes, but nobody's like, well, that's because you hate America. It's, well, we disagree on if this path should be there, if we have the money to do this. And so, again, it just kept intriguing me. And so there was somebody who had kind of said he wasn't going to run again. So after enough conversation, enough time, I'd committed, okay, if he steps out, I'm going to run. He called me and he said, hey, I'm going to run again. I said, perfect, makes my decision easy. I'm out, no worries. I wasn't 100%. Well, Tina Wanger was the council person before me in my seat. She passed away kind of tragically and surprisingly.
Goodness.
So after she passed away, they're going to have a caucus, and I decided I was going to throw my name in the hat. I'd already kind of committed I would. Well, there's 8 people running all of a sudden for this seat. And so it goes before the precinct committee people of that party. And so some shenanigans were going on behind the scenes, I'll call it, where some people said, we're going to pick this person to be the next person in that seat. And I didn't like that. No, you don't get to just pick. You have to run for it, and you have to earn it. And it's based on how you value. There were some things that were going on. We're building a large courthouse, and I was scared that was going to go way over budget. Well, I work in construction, and I'm an attorney. Grants we receive always concerns me. And I'll go into that if you're interested, but there's a case called South Dakota v. Dole that kind of, if you take a grant, let's say you get hooked on that money, and then they change the rules, that can take power away from the local government. So that's a big concern I had. Making sure that we're fiscally conservative, making sure that we're supporting all our law enforcement, making sure that we're building parks and trails for people doing the right thing. Those were things that were important to me. So I ran on that, and I was lucky enough and blessed enough to be able to get it. And so that was kind of how that happened. But it started with 2 people really encouraging me thinking it was a terrible idea, my wife convincing me I was wrong, and then honestly, I've loved it. I love the big decisions. These are $100 million decisions, and you've got a lot of people saying, "Hey, I trust you. Make the right decision," and so there's pressure. And then just making sure that we are supporting our local community, and when we get to put in a new park, and then we're putting in park bathrooms right now. Well, that's a big deal for a lot of people. We got it where not that long ago, we passed, we funded to get down at Oxbow Park where people could use the kayak launch again.
Oh, very good.
Well, we collectively come together as a community to promote that, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah.
A guy told me the other day, he said, I was kayaking out of Oxbow. And in my head, I said, we just passed funding so you could do that. That's exciting to me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're going to be running for re-election in November?
Correct.
What are the challenges for Elkhart County? What do you see that kind of concerns you?
Right now, the budget is a big one. There's a few. So making sure we keep power in this area, which that's not really an Elkhart County problem. It's more of a statewide, nationwide problem, but it's going to affect our development long term. making sure that we are fiscally responsible, but still investing. So I'll give you an example. Roads. So when you do things like chip and seal, it prolongs the life of the road, but there's money up front to do that.
Yeah.
Making sure that's an investment. That's not just a lavish expenditure. Making sure that we don't grow the size of government. Sometimes people want to buy a building, and that always concerns me because then you're going to fill it with something.
Yeah.
So making sure that we're conservative. And we have a conservative county when it comes to fiscal matters, so I don't want to take that away. It's not just me. There's a lot of people who agree with me. But those are, we're in budget season right now. We have to cut a lot to get under kind of our cap. That's a tough thing. What are you cutting? Yeah. And everybody, I've never heard somebody run for office and say, I want to raise your taxes and cut your spending. Nobody ever says that.
Yeah.
They want to lower your taxes and raise your spending. I'll give you everything you want. Well, that's not real unless you're at the federal level, which they can kind of print money in a way.
Yeah, this is concerning. I was going to ask you about that because it seems like, I've been here for almost 30 years, but the national debt is $35 trillion, which I think it only started really at when we went to Iraq, right? Like with
it kicked up a lot. So we've had we've had debt really for a long time. As a percentage of GDP, I think World War II was the highest it ever got. The 50s brought it down quite a bit. But then what you really saw was kind of a plateau. Yeah. The Reagan years actually kicked it up quite a bit. We were kind of outspending the Soviets. We spent a lot and they spent a lot, and then they went into bankruptcy and we won the Cold War.
Yeah.
You see it kind of level off, go down even a little as a deficit during the Clinton years. And then sure enough, 9/11 happens. Well, we spend to go back to war. The problem is we haven't came back down. And what we've really seen is entitlement spending, I'd argue.
Yeah.
That is the thing that is the biggest driver of our debt, I would argue.
Not very knowledgeable in, the fiscal policy between the federal and the state and all that good stuff. I know that, the Elkhart County gets grants.
Yeah.
But what would happen? Because right now, elections in November, presidential elections, there's a lot of stake for a lot of Americans. The perception is inflation is high. We don't need our taxes to go even higher.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody is asking, that something will happen that, bring cost of living down. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, that's kind of tied to how much money the federal government prints. Is related proportionally to inflation.
Yeah.
How do we, what can we do at the local level to prevent, not being so much into debt? Is there like a cap that you guys have for, because I know there's sales of municipal bonds, is that correct?
Yes, that's only for like kind of one-off projects, like for example on the county courthouse that has.
Okay, so that's tied to just a specific project. Okay,
yeah, good. That's not like a general funding source that I'm aware of. Property taxes are a big. There's kind of a couple ways we get. There's a lot of ways actually. One way is the property tax is maybe the biggest driver. Portion of there is a income tax, and most of those are kind of set by the state and kind of what they can and can't be used for. And the thing that the feds did a couple years ago that it always cracks me up because they spent a ton of money to get the government going, and now they're complaining about inflation. And so what they're constantly doing is manipulating the economy. Yeah. So things are tight, we're going to spend to get people spending. Ooh, now it's too hot, so we got to cool it down. Yeah. The problem is what you have is kind of this institution at the top trying to control what 300 million people are going to spend on. Yeah. Well, that doesn't really work because you have an information problem. How do I know what you want? Yeah. So the free market is what does that. So for example, let's say a hurricane hits Florida, and now they need to build a bunch of new houses, which spikes the cost of lumber. Well, what that does is in a market, that tells the market, we need lumber in Florida more than you need it in Indiana, and we're willing to pay more for it. That's how your information is derived.
Right.
If at the top you have a kind of institution saying, no, you're both going to pay the same for that lumber, well, how do I know who needs it more? So what we have then is shortages.
Yep.
And so when I hear, not to get too political, but when I hear like a Kamala Harris right now talking about fixing the price of food, that scares me.
I'm not sure. I'm glad you touched that subject, because we've been touching these subjects in Spanish to the audience in Spanish. We haven't done that in English. But when a lot of people in the Hispanic community heard that from her, we all got scared, because has she heard about what the Venezuelans did?
Right, yeah.
Has she heard what? I mean, it does not work. I mean, and my concern is, does she have any idea how the economy works?
Well, and what's interesting is, and I'll criticize my party a little on this. Sometimes they use the term socialist very loosely. He's a socialist. We don't like him, And I always say, be careful, because when true socialism comes, you're not going to see it because you've cried wolf so much.
Yeah.
When we start talking about, kind of setting price caps, be concerned, because that's legitimate. That's a real reason for concern.
Yes, I agree.
And so it'll create shortages, things like that. But I think inflation has been driven a lot by government spending, whether it was, and I'll attack both parties on this, whether it was the way they instituted the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, or the American Rescue Plan. Yeah. The problem is you typically get elected by saying, I won't raise your taxes and I'll give you whatever you want. That's how you get elected.
Essentially lying, right?
Oh, yeah, it's true. I heard somebody say once, the first rule of economics is scarcity of resources. Not everybody can have what they want. Yeah. The first rule of politics is to ignore the first rule of economics. You can all have what you want. You don't have to pay for it.
That's a good one. I have to remember that.
Yeah, but it's not true. The nice thing is, at the county level, we can't do that. So we have an organization like Baker Tilly or one of these financial institutions comes in and says, this is what we're projecting you're going to have. This is your budget. And so we have to live within that. The only thing, sometimes we get a little more than we were expecting. The projection was wrong. They tend to be conservative projections. Sometimes we get grants. Sometimes we get things like the American Rescue Plan. Sometimes, let's say the Elkhart County Sheriff's Department is slotted for 100 different officers, but they only have 90 on staff. Well, that 10 goes back into the general fund, right? Because we didn't pay for them. So we can use that for additional appropriations for other things that are needed.
Okay.
But we can never spend more than we have. We don't have that option. And what is interesting is, over the years, we've consistently saved up more. And for the first time that, I don't know in how long, to be honest, but we have 6 months in our rainy day fund. And so we have, not only are we healthy in our general balance, but we have a rainy day fund that could fund the government for 6 months here.
Well, that's good.
It's great. That's where we should be. We should always be at 6 months. Well, so what we've told highway department, and what we've clearly sent to them, is say, our roads are bad. Our roads are getting worse. I can show you actual numbers, and we had a presentation from the highway department. Our roads are getting worse than they were 10 years ago. So any more money, it's not going in the rainy day fund. Now we're going to start putting it towards our roads. And that is what I think government should do. It's the essentials. It's not to give you anything you want. It's to give you what we call a market failure. So if I want to build a road to your house, let's say it's $10 million. Well, I don't have $10 million to build a road to your house, and you probably don't have $10 million to build a road to my house. But if all of us chip in $20, we can build a road that connects all our houses.
Yeah.
What I think we need to remember is, what are the fundamentals of government? It is roads, it's parks, it's police officers, it's prosecutors, it's judges. It's these things. What it isn't is wants. Well, yeah. I want this. I want to have a standard of living that is above what the market says. I do too.
Yeah.
But that is not the point of government. It's to where there's market failures to create what others will call a tragedy of the commons. That's where government should have regulation or collectively come together so we can build a road. Sometimes I'll hear things and I'm like, well, yeah, that sounds nice, but that's not a traditional role of government, and I'm not interested in expanding it.
Yeah. I think that's one of the contrasts that we have between political parties, correct?
I think so.
Though the lines have been moving, because like right now, I mean, to talk about left and right nowadays, it confuses people because
it can.
It used to be that, the perception, I'm just going to say that with the Bushes, they are the ones with pro-war, and on the other side, they were like, well, we need peace. But now it's the opposite. Obama came into office, started 7 different wars in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, after 30 years of being here, like, okay, I thought that you guys were the ones pro-immigration. Now you are against immigration. Now it's the opposite. Like, things switch back and forth. So it's better and more productive, I think, to talk about principles. So small government.
Yes.
Small governments. We can talk about immigration. We were talking about immigration. I think it's no secret my position on immigration. We can talk about gun rights. And we can talk about different things. But at this local level, what is the environment at the local level?
And it's different between the cities and the county. Goshen has a Democratic mayor. Elkhart has a Democratic mayor. Countywide, I don't think there's a countywide elected Democrat. I will talk about what I view, and I always start at the starting point for me is that government is not needed. And so it's up to you to overcome that. And so, let me give you an example. Let's say it's, I'll use abortion because I am a pro-life person. But I started at when I go through my exercise, we don't need government to regulate this. And I have this whole thing on why I think it's a life. It's not a religious argument. It's a logical argument. If someone were to walk up and punch a pregnant lady in the stomach, that is horrifying. Yeah. Much, much worse than if you punched me in the stomach. Yeah. Well, what's the difference? Why is one just abhorrent in ways that I can't fathom, and the others, that's probably not something you should do? For me, the difference is life. Yeah. And we protect life. That is, life, liberty, property. That was what was originally written by Locke, and then Thomas Jefferson changed it to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But the 3 tenets of government are they protect life, liberty, and property. That is protecting life. And so the presumption that we didn't need government is overcome. And so that kind of goes on a lot of things where you have to overcome that presumption. For me, that's the small government approach. Yeah. We had a discussion at county not too long ago where should we buy this building? And it would have been economically maybe even better for the county. But the problem was we were going to have tenants in that building. And so my objection, and I was very loud on this, I said, who's going to service the tenants? Are we going to get a new department of tenant occupancy? Well, that's how you grow government. And in 50 years, when government controls half of the county in rent, we're going to be like, how did we get here? Yeah. And so that's not a traditional role of government, and the presumption that we didn't need government there was not overcome for me. There's a lot of, but that's kind of how I view it, and so I try to come at it with a logical approach, and not claiming I'm always right. By no means am I. I'm sure there's lots of people that'll tell you how wrong I can be, but I'm looking at something from, do we need government involved? And the reason for that, and this is a very key. And this is where I think if you're a more left-leaning person, they believe government can help. They can come in and correct market failures and this and that. And there might be some truth there, but here's the problem. The government is backed by a man with a gun. One of the tenets of government is that it claims a monopoly on legitimate violence. Yep. That's the difference between us and a warlord or a gang, is we control the violence. And when something is backed with a man with a gun, you need to limit that, because that is scary. So you don't pay your taxes. At some point, there's going to be a man with a gun that's going to come to your door and they're going to take you to prison. That is the system. Now, I'm not saying I'm against that. I'm not an anarchist. But when you have that, you have to limit it and you have to be very careful. Government should be inefficient. So people are like, why can't government move faster? No, I don't want it to move fast. It scares me when it moves fast. Now, I'm not talking about you want a permit or something like that. But when there's big policy changes, we need to be real careful. Because you know what's really efficient? A dictator. One person just makes the rule, a king, an emperor. That's efficient. It's not better. So that's a little bit of where, and it's also easy to spend someone else's money.
Sure.
You know, we had somebody and they came before the council. I lost this vote, but they wanted, I'm going to say it was 30 grand, maybe it was 20 grand. Not a big portion of the county budget, but to put a fence on a building so that people couldn't go in the parking lot. And I was trying to understand, like, okay, well, what happens if they go in the parking lot? Now, I kind of compared it to if somebody's going to turn around in my driveway. You know how you kind of look out your window and you're like, why are people turning around here? Well, if somebody said for $10, nobody will ever turn around in your driveway again, I'd be like, oh, okay. Now, what if somebody said for $1,000? I'd be like, well, that's not worth $1,000. But if that's not my money, if somebody said, hey, John will pay $1,000 and then nobody will ever turn around in your, I'd be like, all right, that sounds great to me.
Good example.
Yeah, when it's not my money, it's very easy to spend, you know, and so when it's the government's money, which is really your money and my money, taxed at a very small percentage for a much larger pool, I have concern with that.
That's amazing. So, what the Democratic National Convention is almost done. I think today, right? Is the last?
Last night, I believe.
Was it? Really?
Yeah. Kamala Harris's speech was last night.
Okay. So, what do you think? Did you watch it at all? You're not interested?
No, I do. So, I go to the gym every morning, and I'm in there for about 90 minutes. I'm not I love music, but I'm not listening to music. I'm either listening to a book or.
Oh, that's good.
I've been listening to all the speeches. So, I haven't listened to Oprah's yet. That's been one that I've heard a lot about. I think, they did a good job of energizing their base. I think it was a very smart choice on their part, just from a political, to pull Joe Biden off. What's funny is, because I don't listen to them in order, I just listen to different speeches. So I listened to Barack Obama. Man, you talk about a charismatic speaker. He's a good public speaker. Well, then the next one I listened to was Joe Biden right after. And Joe Biden's probably not a great speaker anyway, but you listen to him right after you just listen to Obama, you're like, ooh. So I think, they did a good job of energizing their base. I think they did a very bad job of explaining to me how they're going to do that, the things they do. Yeah. So again, it's very easy for me to tell you, I'm going to cut spending, I'm going to increase spending, I'm going to cut your taxes, I'm going to get, we're going to solve the border crisis, there's going to be no fentanyl in this country, whatever it is.
Right.
How? Imagine I'm running for Congress and I tell you, I'm going to balance your budget. How? Yeah. You're one of 535 people in Congress. You don't control the president. Like, what are you doing? Yeah. And somebody was running for county government here not too long ago, and he came and talked to me. He said, I'm running for. I said, well, tell me why you're running, because he was looking for my endorsement. And he said, well, I want to cut our spending. I said, great. Well, I'm there now. What do you want to cut? Because I'll cut it right now. And he dances and he goes, and I said, well, let me ask, would you cut the sheriff's department? Well, no. Okay. Would you cut the number of prosecutors we have? No, I wouldn't cut that. Okay. Would you cut the parks department? No. Would you cut highway? No. I'm running, like, this is half our budget. What are you cutting was my question. Couldn't give me it. Well, I want to, decrease taxes. What tax? Which tax is it that the county controls that we can vote down? And he hems and haws, and he had no idea. Yeah. I said, it's very easy to say that. I want to know what you're actually going to do. And so when I watched when I watched Kamala Harris last night, great speech. I loved hearing about, how her mother came from, I believe it was India, to meet her father. and they were divorced, and it was a nice story. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's very easy to say, I'm going to solve this border crisis. You're in office now. Solve it now.
Yeah. She had 4 years to do something. I'm still wondering, and I've been asking people, one thing that she has done for the country, one thing, one effort, one something.
I'm a more conservative person, so I'm probably a little biased to ask. And it's not that she's a bad person. I don't get into the identity politics of going after somebody personally. It's nothing about that. It's the policy is what I'm always interested in. So, I'll give you an example. I think it's when Joe Biden was running in the last election, they were seriously talking about increasing the number of Supreme Court justices that we have. And that's been done historically. The number 9 is not set in the Constitution. That's just something we've kind of settled on. And, the last time the court packing scheme under the Roosevelt administration during the New Deal, the switch in time that saved 9, there's a whole thing behind it. But, they said, well, we don't like this is what the left-leaning argument was. We don't like the way the Supreme Court is doing it. So we're just going to increase the number of Supreme Court justices until they'll do it the way we want. Well, what do you think is going to happen when Republicans take office?
Yeah.
They're going to do the exact same. All of a sudden, we're going to have 535 Supreme Court justices.
Yeah.
And what we've done is we've nullified one of the 3 branches of government. That's concerning to me.
Yeah.
And so, years ago, and I think the Supreme Court, some of the ways they've done the picks, Joe Biden made this argument in the early 90s that if in the last year of an election, you kind of have a lame duck president, he shouldn't get to pick a Supreme Court nominee. So guess what Republicans did when they had that same situation?
Yeah.
That's what they did. Harry Reid used the nuclear option, which was to switch the number from, it was either 2/3 or 3/4. Harry Reid did that as a Democrat. So what did Republicans do when they came in? They did the same thing. And you know what he said? Well, that's not fair. Well, how's it not fair? It's exactly what you just did. But I think we need to be careful on some of that, which goes back to my inefficiency. But I think it's great to tell me I'm going to get everything I want and I'm not going to pay any more in taxes and we're going to have rainbows and sunshine. Do it now.
Yeah.
You're in office right now.
Yeah, and I think it's time to get serious. National debt, way up there. Inflation, way up there. Unemployment, they just released a correction of the job, the jobs that actually they miscalculated it, minus 800,000 jobs. I mean, companies are laying off, from the tech sector. We're seeing a decline. I know that they don't like to say it's a recession. I believe they changed the definition of it. But we're feeling it here on Main Street. Maybe Wall Street does not respond because, again, there's another subject of how Wall Street works. I don't really fully understand how that works. But we know that the people on the streets, the people that they continue to arrive here. That's another thing. Immigration is a big subject for this presidential election. The effect of so many migrants coming to different cities. This is a heavy subject for me because my heart goes for the immigrants. And I do have a bias, obviously.
Yeah.
I do understand. I think that the better way to approach this is having a dialectic approach. We don't have to be one or the other. I think that we have to understand as a human being, be empathetic, but at the same time, we have to do the right thing for our country. And what I can tell you that I've seen is a massive influx of Hispanic people from, Venezuela, some of them which have what they called sponsorship or some kind of asylum.
Yep.
Which is creating some tensions within the Hispanic community because there are those migrants who have been here for more than 20 years, who have been paying their taxes and who have kids serving in the military and they have been ignored. They feel ignored by this administration. And, all of a sudden he turns around and he starts giving asylum to other countries and they start coming here and they get all these benefits. You've heard about the EBT cards that they received with thousands of dollars. It became a huge issue in Chicago. There were, I don't know if the people is aware that there were Hispanic people protesting the migrants in Chicago. So it's creating frictions, and it's creating division within our community, the Hispanic community. So immigration is a complicated subject. It's not something that we will fix. So I'm interested in finding from both candidates what are they planning to do. The last amnesty we had was with Ronald Reagan. And
he did it 3 times, if I remember.
And he was able to gain a lot of Hispanics into, the Republican Party. And, there's a lot of opportunities for improvement, obviously. But, where's the tangible, what's the plan? What are we going to do? Jobs are becoming scarcer in this area. The RV industry just went down. The market corrected. A lot of people looking for jobs. Friends of mine have left the area here, Michiana area. A lot of people thought that it was a prosperous area where people could come and, get jobs. There are no jobs, so that's the concerning part for a Hispanic. I'm going to tell you, is the economy. Like Bill Clinton said in his campaign, I believe in 1992, his economy is to remember that. Yep.
That was James Carville. So, yeah.
Most important thing, migrants, when I speak for Mexicans, I am Mexican. I think I have the right to say this. We come for work opportunities.
Yeah.
And I keep saying this. We don't come here so that you can give us, I don't know, a certificate of appreciation or, hey, you're included into our club. No, we came here to work. We don't believe in the give me stuff for free. We don't. We just give me a job opportunity and I'll do the rest. And we have interviewed hundreds of people in this studio that came here with nothing, and thank you to the United States, opportunities. They built businesses, they bought their houses, they sent their kids to college. They're living the American dream, and we feel, the Hispanic community here feel that American dream is at risk. So we're not into the ideological battles of the left or the right. We're like, we need jobs.
Yeah.
That's the bottom part.
And I do think, again, when it comes to jobs, whether it's at the local level, so I'll speak to that, or whether it's at the federal level, the state level, any level you want to look at it, government should not create jobs. It should create an environment where jobs can be created.
Correct.
So less regulation is typically better, which goes back to my limit it.
Well, let me stop there because what Trump did, and because these different policies, it's the external or foreign policy when it comes to economics and internal. So what you're saying is we don't want internal regulation in the business.
Correct. Because
external we do want. I mean, Mexico is doing that. Other countries are doing that. We're entering into a phase where countries are saying, hey, you know what? We need to take care of ourselves and we need to protect our own industries. It seems like this globalism idea is collapsing. It didn't work because it's not efficient. I mean, you have to be bringing resources from one country so they can make it in another country so you can bring it here when you can just make it all in here. And offshore and onshore and all that good stuff.
And there is a natural cycle of economies where, you kind of have more agricultural base, then you kind of turn into manufacturing, then it goes to services based. China right now is kind of going from more of a manufacturing into a services. As the cost of living rises, you'll see that switch to other countries. It's India, other Southeast Asia countries. Whether it's free, I probably lean more on the side of free trade. There is time, especially when there's like national defense issues for things. But when we're importing a lot of oil but not drilling here, if you want to get rid of oil, that's one argument. But you can't say we're going to limit it here and get it from another place that with people who typically don't.
One of the first things that Biden did is cancel that X-line pipeline, right?
Right. And I don't remember if it was him that did it but
no, it was him.
For me at the local level, which is what I have more to do with, I want to make sure that if you have a good idea and you can create a business that provides value to others, that you can do that. And so if you go to build a building, I want to make sure that our permitting process isn't obnoxiously long. Yeah. That's something we can do on. We can create IT and technology so that you can move faster through the process of what you already need to do. And so when I talk about government inefficiency, I'm talking about policy decisions. When I talk about a policy decision that's already been made, I don't want people standing in line for 2 hours trying to get a permit. Or if you've lived in other countries where you have to pay somebody to walk your permit through because it's a corrupt system. Well, we don't want that. We do want efficiency on that level. We want to make sure that we support local business in that way. But what I don't want to do is get into the habit of picking winners and losers either. Yeah. So you had a bad business decision and now it went under. Do we have to save you? And, then you get into too big to failure. I don't think government is trying to do the wrong thing. I think they're not good at picking the right thing. So years ago, they gave tax breaks to companies so that they could get their people health insurance. Well, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. You know what that created? Now, if you lose your job, you lose your health insurance. Yeah. Well, that's terrible. It created this very inefficient system. We have monopolies on health insurance, or, at the bare minimum, just a few competitors. That's not good. Yeah. And so when you have something like the Affordable Care Act, man, that sounds wonderful. More people get access to health insurance. We create these pools. But the problem is, health insurance companies were helping write that policy. Yeah. So they're not writing it against themselves. Here at the local level, one thing that we do is we give tax abatements to certain companies that want to create jobs here. A lot of the ones that I had nothing to do with, but when they have to come back up every year to show that they are doing what they said they would do. Normally it's job creation. So let's say if I get a tax abatement, I'm going to create 100 new jobs here. There's kind of a scoring metric on how they can do that. But if they do it, let's say they come back though in a year and say, I know I said I was going to create 100, but I only created 40. It's just the most I could do. Well, historically, a lot of local government has continued to give them the tax abatement. And me and some others have taken a strong stance and said, if you don't live up to it, we're pulling your abatement. Like, if you didn't do what you said you were going to do, we're pulling it. And we've pulled a few of them here lately. I don't like a tax abatement. That's kind of picking a winner and a loser. There are certain times where somebody can overcome that. It's going to diversify the economy. We're so big on RV here, and I don't want to get rid of our manufacturing. But what is the first thing you're going to give up in a recession? A recreational vehicle.
Discretionary spending mostly.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but recreational. It's in the name. Yeah. And so then we have these big booms and these big busts, and these big booms and these big busts. Man, if we could pull in a medical manufacturer, that would be a little nicer because they're a little more stable. You know, even in a recession, you're still going to pay for surgery. Yeah. So I think maybe that's a place where I could plug my nose as much as I hate a tax abatement, look the other way and kind of vote for it. I don't think I've come across that yet. But that's where, if it's just another RV company coming in and saying, I want a tax abatement so I can compete with every other RV company here. We already have that. That's a struggle. Yeah. Now, the hard part is when some of those are going to leave and they're going to take it over to St. Joe County where they will give them a tax abatement. Yeah. Well, now we're all racing to the bottom. And so there's times where, you end up kind of going with it. But that's the challenge that I think that's one of the big challenges. And some of, to limit the tax abatements, to do things like that. But I don't want, I remember a few years ago, I was watching the news and we had a great jobs report and just an amazing jobs report. And the stock market went down. And I was like, why did the stock market? We just had great news on the economy. Well, because the economy is doing so well, the Fed's going to raise the interest rate, so the stock market's crashing. And I'm like, that's not market-based, that's government-based. Yeah. That's scary to me.
Yes, it is. There's a lot of speculation in the market. A lot of speculation.
And you're speculating more on what the government's going to do than what the economy is going to do. Yeah. And so I want to make sure that we're pushing back against that whenever we can.
Wow. Well, Steven, it's been a wonderful conversation, a lot to learn, very informative. And again, a reminder to our audience, you're running for re-election this November.
Yes, sir. I would appreciate your vote. Steven Clark.
And so please share this content, like, subscribe if you haven't done so. And do you have a webpage where people can learn more about you or reach out to you? Or
I have a Facebook page. I think it's called Steve Clark for County Council.
Okay.
Or for Elkhart County Council. And yeah, always feel free to reach out to me. I do check it. And again, if you have issues, sclark@elkhartcounty.com is my email. I will check that. I really try to take an interest in what our community needs, and I want to listen to what the people need.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you so much, and thank you for your service, by the way.
Thank you. No, thank you for the GI Bill. It worked out for both of us here.
Good. Well, family, friends, there you have it. Steven Clark, Elkhart County Councilman. And please, again, subscribe, like, and share. And we'll see you next time. I'm Magdiel Santiago. This is the Goshen Chronicles. Thank you. Bye-bye.